The House Committee on Human Services will now come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Frank,
Here.
Vice Chair Rose,
Here.
Representative Click,
Here.
Representative Shaheen, Representative Ramos,
Here.
Representative Noble,
Here.
Representative Campos, Representative Hull,
Here.
Representative Manuel. And
Machine.
Representative Shaheen.
A quorum is present. Members, today we're going to take up pending business and hear new bills and take public testimony and vote on 4 bills that you guys all have that information. Reminder to those in the audience wishing to testify on bills listed on the agenda, you do need to fill out a witness affirmation form. Please do this in a witness registration kiosk outside the hearing room, or excuse me, if you need assistance registering, you can approach our Assistant Clerk, Blake, to help with registration. You can also speak to him if you require the use of a translator or have any other disability for which you need assistance. If you've already registered and you wish to change your position, please let us know when you're called or talk to the Assistant Clerk. Please don't register twice. Testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. Members, there is a timer. The first beep is your 15 seconds. So when you hear that first beep, please wrap up, and then if members ask questions, you'll have more time. If you have any handouts you want to distribute, please give them to the Assistant Clerk. Members, any questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. We're going to do the voting first. Chair lays out House Bill 54 as pending business. Members, we heard this bill in committee last week. House Bill 54 by Representative Thompson relates to the personal needs allowance for certain Medicaid recipients who are residents of long-term care facilities. HB 54 increases the personal needs allowance for residents in long-term care facilities from $60 a month to $85 a month. The chair does offer a committee substitute. The committee substitute for HB 54 ties the personal needs allowance to the consumer price index to adjust for inflation so the agency can adjust the percentage without legislative direction in the future. Is there any objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the substitute is adopted. Vice Chair Rose moves that HB 54 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. Clerk will call the roll.
Thank you. Chair Frank,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rose,
Aye.
Representative Click,
Aye.
Representative Ramos,
Aye.
Representative Shaheen,
No.
Representative Noble,
Aye.
Representative Campos, Representative Hull,
Aye.
Representative Manuel.
There being 6 ayes and 1 nay, and the motion prevails. Chair recognizes Representative Manuel as present. Chair lays out House Bill 113 as pending business. Members, we heard this bill in committee last week as well. HB 113 allows managed care organizations that are contracted with the state through STAR Medicaid to report community health workers' expenses as quality improvement rather than administrative expenses. Members, any questions? The chair moves that HB 113 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed. Clerk will call the roll.
Chair Frank,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rose,
Aye.
Representative Click,
Aye.
Representative Shaheen,
Aye.
Representative Ramos,
Aye.
Representative Noble,
Aye.
Representative Campos, Representative Hull,
Aye.
Representative Manuel.
There being 8 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails. Chair lays out HB 140 as pending business. Members, we heard this bill in committee last week. HB 140 relates to the provision of certain co-navigation services to individuals who are deaf and blind. It creates a co-navigation services program to assist those who are deaf-blind with communication and navigation. It also provides funding for co-navigators, which are persons trained to help the deaf-blind physically access their environment and make informed decisions. Members, any questions? Representative Click moves that HB 140 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed. Clerk will call the roll.
Chair Frank,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rose,
Yes, aye.
Representative Click,
She's still in appropriations right now.
Representative Shaheen, Representative Ramos, Representative Noble,
Aye.
Representative Campos, Representative Hull,
Aye.
and Representative Manuel.
There being 8 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails. And finally, the chair lays out House Bill 465 as pending business by Rep. Theory. Members, where this bill was well in committee last week, HB 465 relates to a pilot program to provide Medicaid coverage of doula services. It would allow Medicaid reimbursement for doula services. Members, any questions? Representative Ramos moves that House Bill 465 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that do pass and be printed. Clerk will please call the roll.
Chair Frank,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rose,
Aye.
Representative Click,
Nay.
Representative Shaheen, Representative Ramos,
Aye.
Representative Noble,
Aye.
Representative Campos, Representative Hull,
Aye.
Representative Manuel.
There being 6 ayes and 1 nay, the motion prevails. All right. You want to go 728 in order? Okay, the chair lays out House Bill 728 and recognizes Vice Chair Rose to explain her bill. Vice Chair, while you're looking for that, I understand you have intentions to change this bill. We don't have the committee sub in front of us, but obviously if you want to talk to us about it, you can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to lay out House Bill 728. Texas will soon have the second largest age population in the United States. The number of Texans aged 65 and plus will have grown by 3 million between 2010 and 2030. By 2050, an estimated 7.2 million Texans, or 1 out of every 5 Texans, would be at the age of 65, including myself. As the Texas
way.
population ages, the demand for essential services and support will increase. HB 728 establishes the Interagency Aging Services Coordinating Council for the purpose of developing a 5-year statewide strategic plan in support of the population aged 60 and older. The plan will include an inventory of programs and services for older Texans currently offered by state agencies and institutions of higher education. A report on the number of persons aged 60 and older served by each agency. And detailed plan to coordinate these programs and services to 1, eliminate redundancy, utilize best practices and contracting standards, replicate successful models for aging services coordination to ensure optimal service delivery, and identify and collect comparable data on results and effectiveness. The strategic plan would also include demographic information from the Texas Demographic Center. The council would also include the following agencies: the Office of the Governor, the Veterans Commission, Health and Human Services, Department of Family and Protective Services, Department of State Health Services, Texas Workforce Commission, Office of the Attorney General, Department of Agriculture, UT Health Center, San Antonio Barshop Institute for Longevity and Aging Studies, UT Austin Aging and Longevity Center, and Texas A&M Center for Population Health and Aging. We are currently working on a committee substitute establishing a timeline for the council to submit their strategic plan and ties the council to the overall HHSC sunset timeline. This concept builds on the success of the statewide Behavioral Health Coordinating Council and seeks to ensure a statewide strategic approach to rapidly growing aging population. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I reserve the right to close. If anyone have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
All right, and the chair recognizes Representative Campos is present. Members, any questions? All right, you do have Couple witnesses.
When you have good bills, you don't have questions.
What's that?
When you have good bills, you don't get questions.
Oh, all right, I got some questions.
No,
All right.
one of the problems, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Chair calls. I'm sorry, there we go, sorry. Yeah, we'll now begin public testimony on House Bill 728. The Chair calls John Weiserbaum, representing self, registered for the bill. If you'd state your name, who you're with, and your position on the bill.
Good morning, Chairman Frank and members of the committee. My name is John Weisenbaum. I'm testifying on my own behalf. I am the former commissioner of the former Texas Department of Aging and Disability Services. That agency was moved into the Health and Human Services Commission in 2017, but I was its commissioner for the last 5 years that it was around. So I have a career in services to older Texans, and I'm very committed to the state's efforts to try and address this, and I am in strong support of this bill by Representative Rose. Members, as Representative Rose said, the population of Texas is aging, and it's aging very rapidly. As she noted, our population will have, our older adult population will have more than doubled between 2010 and 2030. And that'll bring us to almost 6 million older adults. To give you a sense of perspective, if you think of the state of Florida right now, where we think of as one of the largest concentrations of older adults, 5.9 million is 30% more than all the older adults who are currently living in Florida now. That's what we'll be dealing with in just 2030, just a couple sessions away. We also know that the rates of disability and the costs of serving people with healthcare services and long-term services and supports are at their highest, especially when people reach the age of 85 and above. That's a marker where long-term care expenses and hospital expenses really shoot up. And the number of these oldest Texans is growing at an even higher rate than Texans in general. I think by 2030, the largest concentration of older adults over 85 will be hitting that mark. So these changes present a huge challenge to you all as Texas leaders. We can see this baby boom bulge coming down the pike, so to speak, as the years progress. And when you look at a program like Medicaid, last biennium, according to the LBB, Medicaid costs totaled over $68 billion, all funds. 2/3 of that number is serving people who are older adults or have disabilities. And yet they only represent 20%, about a fifth of that total population. So even though they're a small portion of Medicaid recipients, they represent almost 2/3 of the costs of that. That really puts an obligation on the state to address this issue, see it coming, and try and identify the best ways to provide services to those folks and to set us up to go through that phase of population with the most effective, cost-effective services. The beauty of this bill is that it addresses a lot of agencies because aging affects more than just health and human service agencies. It affects veterans, it affects all the different services that in systems that we provide as a state government. They're all affected by this aging of the population. By bringing them all together in one bill, it addresses that and it focuses on expenditures that you're going to have to make. I'll close with that. This is good government and it's a good bill, so I appreciate it.
Thank you for your testimony. Just a quick question, or really two. Any idea what recommendations you think will come out of this?
There are a lot of possible recommendations that could come out of it. I know that I focused a lot on costs, and I think a lot about the Medicaid program as, you know, the biggest cost driver for the state serving this population. One example where we could pay close attention would be those individuals on Medicaid who receive both Medicare and Medicaid. They are known as the dual eligible population. And there are different efforts nationally to better coordinate services for those folks because you're dealing then with the Medicare program, with Medicare Advantage plans, and you have our Medicaid MCOs having those two systems work together in a way that reduces costs, I hope will be part of the recommendations. Anything we can do to reduce unnecessary hospitalizations and unnecessary nursing facility placements is in our interest. And so that's what I hope the focus will be
All right.
on.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? All right. Thank you for your testimony. There's to show one other person wishing to testify. Chair calls Eddie Oram from AARP Texas, registered for the bill. Please state your name, who you're with, and your position on the bill, please.
Yes, I certainly will. Good morning, Chairman Frank, Vice Chair Rose, and members. I am Eddie Oram, and I'm from Houston, Texas, and I'm a member of the AARP Executive Council. Thank you for the opportunity for me to be here today. I'm pleased to testify.
And your position on the bill?
We are in support of the bill.
Thank you.
Sure. On behalf of AARP Texas and in support of HB 728, authored by Representative Tony Rose. This will establish a statewide interagency aging service coordinating council. Our mission at AARP is to enhance the quality of life as we all age. We champion positive social change and deliver values through advocacy, information, and service. Establishing the Interagency Aging Service Coordinating Council will work toward achieving that goal. There are absolutely bright sides to a shift in our demographic changes. We know that the demography is changing to older populations. Our economy will also benefit. According to a study by AARP, the economic contributions of the age 50-plus population in this country will triple, as Representative Rose said, by 2050. Older persons will be major drivers of our spending habits, and Texas' fast-growing older population will be at the center of these economic waves. Texans age 50-plus also will continue to be major contributors in a vast number of ways, including as volunteers, innovators, and experienced thought leaders. Older Texans will flourish and shape our state in wonderful ways. The Interagency Aging Service Coordinating Council will help to shepherd the immense demographic shift in Texas. And from a personal perspective, I am a caregiver for my 91-year-old mother and my 89-year-old aunt. When I became their caregiver, I had the compassion, the will, and the values for caregiving. What I lacked was the knowledge to address the changes of a family member suffering from Alzheimer's disease and navigating the Medicare and Medicaid issues. As I work with other families, and particularly those in underrepresented and underserved communities, I realize that Texans deserve a more efficient system to gather necessary information in an effort to support our loved ones. The Interagency Aging Service Coordinating Council is critical for Texans to be prepared to support our growing aging population. I'm extremely pleased to offer testimony today in support of House Bill 728, and I certainly want to thank Vice Chair Rose for her leadership and her dedication to our elder issues. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. Members, any questions? Yes.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there another state that provides or that has an interagency council similar to this one that's being proposed?
I am not completely aware of the specifics here. I do know in California, they do have Regency agencies where they actually coordinate services, actually include respite care as well, in an effort to make sure that all the different agencies who people like me look for resources and support, they're in one place. And California is the best example. I'm not sure it's the only example.
Does AARP, well, I guess that was, does AARP provide similar, is this the place where people are going to now?
Most definitely.
Okay.
I am with ARP because I began to search for resources, and they were the first agency that came to my attention in caregiving, finding out how to navigate the support that I needed from my family. ARP is beginning to work with other agencies as well, such as the Alzheimer's Association. So what we want to do is to replicate what ARP is beginning to do by making sure we have a one-stop shopping place for people who are providing care for their loved ones.
Wonderful. So you all have largely been filling that void.
Yes, we do that nationally. We have an interest in bills such as this. We also believe in anything that's going to help our elder population age in a way that we choose, in a way that's best for us. And I also believe that as caregivers, we want to begin that process very early.
Sir, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? All right, thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. At this time, there are no other witness, oh, I'm sorry. I am sorry, there is. Chair calls Ashley Ford with the ARC of Texas, registered for the bill. Okay, does not wish to testify. Okay. At this time, there are no other witnesses signed up to testify. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 728? Seeing none, public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Vice Chair Rose to close on her bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses who testified. Members, establishing this council doesn't mean we spend more money. The committee is about breaking down silos to ensure we make the most of the financial and other resources focused on Texans 60 and over. And so with that, members,
Can I ask one question? It'll be a good one. It'll be a good one. No, I just wanted, because I think, part of the reason a lot of this is put under HHSC is to be able to coordinate, but I think there's some coordination that needs to happen. But one thing I was going to just suggest, there is some wording from some other studies that I've seen, because right now we're doing a study, handing it to the agency, but there's no real requirement for action once it's done. I think there's some wording that we could add that basically says within 90 days or within a time frame that they have to respond in writing. And that doesn't mean they have to take it all, because this is just a interagency group, right? It's a group of people. They're going to give good ideas. Some of them the agency will be able to support and do, and then some of them, but to make them respond in writing within 90 days that, yes, we agree with this, we're going to do this, no, we don't agree with this, but it requires action, because I think a lot of times these reports get read, but nothing happens. And so that's just something, and I can work with you on the language. If you like that idea, if you don't, that's cool too. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I think that's a great idea, Mr. Chairman.
Every once in a while, we stumble on something. It wasn't my idea. I just glommed onto it. So, I think it's a good thing to do. So, anyway, with that, any other comments?
I move that we vote this out immediately and get to the local and consent calendar.
All right, we will. If there's no objection, House Bill 728 we left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and HB 728 is left pending without objection, ma'am. The chair now lays out House Bill 7. We're kind of entertaining sometimes, right? The two of us. The chair lays out House Bill 729 and recognizes Vice Chair Rose to explain her bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If they only know our story, they.
That's right, and the same. I know you have some changes you're going to make on this bill, but we don't have the committee substitute before us. But you are welcome to explain them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, again for this opportunity to lay out House Bill 729. Persons with intellectual or developmentally disabilities, also known as IDD, experience severe chronic issues or chronic conditions that are due to mental and or physical impairments. Quality care and sustainable services needed for persons with IDD is heavily dependent on the ability of policy experts, civic leaders, and caregivers of IDD persons to come together and make informed decisions to improve the lives of this community. According to data collected by the United Cerebral Palsy and the ANCOR Foundation, my vocal cord is not working well with me today. Y'all just bear with me. Texas ranked 49th overall in efforts to serve individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Despite the polarization of many policy issues throughout the nation, states with varying political spectrums, such as Oregon, Kentucky, California, South Dakota, have enhanced their approach to Medicaid services and programs to support IDD populations. For example, the IDD Council in South Dakota is comprised of 25 members, where at least 60% of the members are required to be persons with IDD or parents, guardians of individuals with IDD. Reimagining of the Future, a report published by HHSC under the statutory authority of the 2021 General Appropriations Act, identified emerging issues and trends related to planning, or state-supported living centers and resources to support the care of persons with IDD. According to the report, interagency collaborations that build upon existing resources within the state, such as implementing statewide IDD strategic plan, can supply legislators, program managers, and caregivers with the information necessary to provide the best quality of care to persons with IDD. House Bill 729 creates a statewide intellectual disabilities coordinating council with the goal of ensuring statewide approach to intellectual and developmental disability services. Members of the council will include at least one representative from the following: Health and Human Services, Medicaid, IDD Health and Specialty Care, HCIS Access and Eligibility, and Ombudsman. Department of State Health Services, Department of Family and Protective Services, the Texas Workforce Commission, Texas Education Agency, the University of Texas Austin Center for Disability Studies, and a local intellectual and development disability authority representative chosen by HHSC, and a public policy organization focused on IDD by HHSC. Without this council, Texas will not be able to offer the necessary resources and strategies for IDD quality care for thousands of residents. We are currently working on a committee substitute that will require the coordinating council to submit a report to the legislature before the start of next session and tie the council to the overall HHSC sunset timeline. Ultimately, this bill allows experts to share crucial information on improving the lives of our IDD population so we as policymakers can make the best informed decisions on how to effectively ensure they have the resources they need. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, and I reserve the right to close.
You certainly have that. Members, any questions? Yes, Representative Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Rose, I have a question. There's already two state commissions on this. One is the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities, but the one that's more connected to yours is there's a Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities that's already in statute. How is yours? Is yours any different from those two? Are we duplicating efforts at this point, is my question.
I don't think we're duplicating the efforts. Are these same agencies all involved with the other? I mean, because I'm not familiar with the one you talked about.
I have no idea, but I think it would. I think it warrants looking at before we pass this one, just to make sure that we're not adding something that that isn't necessary at this point.
Well, I don't do things that's not necessary, so that for sure is not the deal, because I know we did research and we felt that bringing all of these agencies together would be more, but anyway.
I guess my other question is, could we put what's already out there, give them this task, or is this? Do you feel like these specific members are necessary for this task?
Thank you for that's exactly what it is. That's why we brought all these agencies together. Now, I will look into what you're saying and then have a follow-up with you on that, but I do believe that bringing all of these agencies together would be able to coordinate and come up with better strategies. And I'm not for sure exactly what the governor's.
And we have a resource witness that might be able to answer that question.
Well, that'll help.
Why don't, does anybody else have any questions for Chair Rose? All right, actually, I'm going to call Claire Benitez with HHSC on the bill. If you'd state your name, who you're with, your position on the bill, and.
Hi, my name is Claire Benitez. I'm with HHSC, Office of Disability Services Coordination.
Okay, and you heard the discussion.
Yeah, Claire,
So do you know about the other, the one that Representative Noble was talking about, and how similar, how different they are?
I'm familiar with the Texas Council of Developmental Disabilities, but as far as the details that Representative Noble was talking about, I don't have those details. However, for the Governor's Committee, I'm a little bit more familiar with that. I do act as the HHSC ex officio on the Governor's Committee. That does have other state representation, but it is dissimilar in some ways. Not all agencies present are present on the Governor's Committee.
Okay, thank you. And then What is typically done with reports like this? This kind of goes back, because I was going to make the same comment that I made before on the having the agency respond in writing. What typically happens with reports like these when they're given to the agency? Is there a
Similar to-
process?
Yeah, similar to what you had mentioned, the process would be the agencies come together, determine various recommendations that may be attributed to other agencies instead of just one, and then when that report is developed and processed, it's shared amongst those other agencies that participated.
Okay, thanks. Members, any other questions? All right, thank you very much for being here. Show only one person wishing to testify, and so the chair calls Ashley Ford with ARC of Texas, showing for the bill. So if you think you're going to testify on this, make sure you're registered, because I'm the only person I show. You state your name, who you're with, and your position on the bill, please.
Hi there, Ashley Ford with the ARC of Texas, and we are in support of House Bill 729.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to speak to a wonderful question that Representative Noble brought up as far as sort of the differences between the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities, or the DD Council, the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities. I used to work for the DD Council for about 5 years, and so I feel like I am uniquely situated to sort of speak to the differences between what the DD Council is charged with and what the IDD Coordinating Council it would be charged with. And so the DD Council was established through the Developmental Disabilities Act, which is a federal law that is back from JFK's time as president. And so really what the DD Council is charged in doing is creating systems change through funding innovative grants, innovative demonstration projects. And so all of the members of the DD Council are governor-appointed board members, and yes, there are ex officio council representation that is spelled out within the DD Act that is required, but it is different because they are not charged with looking specifically at how IDD services are being delivered and looking for ways to streamline and remove duplicative processes. The Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities is also different because they have a cross-disability focus. And so it is not specifically on intellectual and developmental disabilities like this coordination council would be, but they look at sort of the big definition of disability globally, the Americans with Disability Act provision, and they are required to be housed within the governor's office. And again, they are not looking at the coordination of services across, for example, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and the Health and Human Services Commission, or the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, all of which are places that we know people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the state of Texas are being served, but we are just not doing a very good idea of identifying or tracking them within each of these agencies right now, which is why this bill is so critical for ensuring that we can have a sustainable future for Texans with IDD in the state of Texas.
Okay, thank you, members. Any questions? Yeah, Representative Manuel.
Hello. How would this help the ARC be able to kind of move? Because I know you guys are kind of independent, but you still kind of go with services through the state. How would this bill help you all out at the?
We believe that this bill would benefit Texans with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which we are charged with representing, and so we advocate alongside and behalf of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities across the state of Texas. And so we do believe that the establishment of this council would further promote and protect the self-determination and human rights of Texans with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Chairman.
At this time, there are no other witnesses signed up to testify. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against HB 729? Seeing none, public testimony is now closed, and the chair recognizes Vice Chair Rose to close on HB 729.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really appreciate Ashley Ford for explaining the difference between the two. As you see, we're trying to take a comprehensive approach with strategies for this population. And so it would also provide a platform for policymakers and caregivers to collaborate on best practices to ensure the best quality of care for these individuals. And with that, members, I close and I ask that House Bill 729 be reported favorably and sent to the local and consent calendar. Thank you.
If there is no objection, House Bill 729 will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none. House Bill 729 is left pending without objection. All right. Ready? You want to go in straight order? Okay. The chair lays out House Bill 1008 and recognizes Representative Turner to explain his bill. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And you do have some changes. We don't have the committee sub, but obviously you talk about them all you want.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Talk about
Thank
the
you, Mr.
changes.
Chairman.
Yes.
Vice Chair Rose and members of the committee. And as the chairman said, we'll have a committee substitute on this bill and practically all the bills that I'll be laying out today. But we got them back rather late, so I'll talk about what the
Where we are.
subs will do, even though you don't have them before you at the moment. Mr. Chairman, members, 2 years ago, my constituents, Donald and Leslie Moore, suffered every parent's worst nightmare, something no parent should ever have to experience. The Moores had entrusted the care of their adult son, Joshua Moore, to a group home. Joshua had severe autism. It caused behavior problems and frequent outbursts. And Mr. Moore believed that a group home was the best place for his son. He believed that a group home would be where Joshua would be safe and where he would receive the care that he needed. Joshua's behavior problems were no secret. They were well documented. Mr. Moore was aware, the provider was aware, and the caregiver was aware. And because of that, Joshua had a thorough, detailed behavior plan that specified that he should, among other things, should not have access to anything sharp, and further that there were certain words that needed to be avoided because they were known to trigger outbursts. Unfortunately, one evening in July of 2021, Joshua did become upset at the group home, and his behavior plan was not adhered to. In his agitated state, Joshua was able to find a knife that had been left in the kitchen sink. In response to Joshua wielding the knife in his agitated state, the caregiver in the group home pulled a gun out of a nearby kitchen drawer and fatally shot Joshua. Over the past year, I've gotten to know the Moores. Don Moore and his wife have never stopped fighting for answers about what happened to their son, for accountability for who was involved, and for the necessary changes to ensure that this tragedy is not repeated and that other families don't have to experience the agony that they have experienced. One of the most difficult things that came to light as we worked with Mr. Moore throughout on this case was that due to the investigation backlogs and ongoing appeals, the caregiver who shot and killed Joshua was legally still allowed to care for intellectually and developmentally disabled individuals in group homes. Not only did Mr. Moore have to mourn the loss of his son, but he had to live with the fact that the caregiver responsible for his death could legally still be caring for other vulnerable individuals, like his late son. Members, that's unacceptable. So as introduced, House Bill 10,008 simply prohibits a caregiver from providing direct care to an individual with an intellectual or developmental disability if they have been accused of misconduct such as this. Currently, if a caregiver is found to have engaged in misconduct involving abuse, neglect, or exploitation of an individual with IDD, once their case is closed, they are barred from caring for individuals. However, this does not take effect until the decision is final and the appeals process has been exhausted, which can take a very long time. Investigations in the appeals process, in fact, can take months, in Joshua's case over a year, allowing a caregiver who has been credibly accused of misconduct to continue serving these very vulnerable populations. So members, as I mentioned, there will be a committee substitute that you'll have before you soon. And taking stakeholder feedback into account, Our substitute will call for only suspending workers who've been found to have engaged in misconduct, but who continue to appeal their case. So that's a compromise to address some of the concerns from stakeholders. And that was the case in this specific situation. With the case, in the instance of Joshua's caregiver, he was found by HHSC to have neglected Joshua, and that was the official finding. But under current law, he's allowed to continue providing care in group homes while his case is on appeal with the commission. And so you'll have copies of the updated substitute. Well, you do have them when the chair's ready to distribute them.
Yep.
So Mr. Moore is here and can talk a little bit about this case from his perspective. And I believe there's a few other witnesses too, and I respectfully request the right to close.
Yeah,
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, and I, excuse me, I appreciate, I think obviously when something like this happens, it's tragic, and we want answers, and we want to figure out how to fix it, but we also need to make sure that we don't create problems in it. So I appreciate you taking some of the stakeholder feedback into consideration, because obviously when you're working in a group home, there's accusations often. Some of them are founded, some of them are accurate, some of them are not, and you don't want people losing their jobs over an accusation, but obviously when you have some, anyway, so I appreciate you working on that. Hopefully we continue to work on it so that it's great policy and to try to prevent things like this in the future. And members, any other comments, questions? Okay, and we do have a resource witness, by the way, if anybody has, we do on all the bills, and we'll reserve your right to close. Chair calls Sandra Batten from the Providers Alliance for Community Services of Texas on the bill. Right, on the bill. And then Don Moore is on deck. And when I let you know, just kind of to speed things up, there's a couple chairs down here. If you're next up to testify, you can go ahead and come on up. So if Don Moore would come up, and I'll show only one other person. If you state your name, who you're with, and your position on the bill.
Great, thank you.
That's fine.
I'm Sandy Batten with Providers Alliance for Community Services of Texas, or PACS-TEX, testifying on the bill. PACS-TEX is an association of providers supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, like autism and Down syndrome, and the Home and Community-Based Services, or HCS waiver program. The HCS waiver can be really complicated to understand. The service really isn't quite like any other long-term care service. It's regulated by certification, not licensure, and by that I mean it's mainly federal rule and state rule. It's not really in statute. And the services aren't solely in one facility. They're spread out. They're in multiple facilities, and they can also be in a person's home. There are attendant-like services. There's day programming. There's foster care-like arrangements called host home companion care settings, and where individuals live in the home of their caregiver. And there's 3- and 4-bedroom group homes. All services are coordinated and billed by an HCS provider, and some of the direct care staff are employees. Others are contractors. Some are family members of the individuals with IDD. Others are third party. So we really appreciate all the time that Representative Turner and his staff have spent to better understand and parse through all the intricacies to design a committee substitute that makes sense. We haven't had a chance to see it, and I know what I just described doesn't really tell you much about our position on the bill, but all that to say, the bill as filed was a little bit difficult for us to understand how it would be implemented. And while we still have some questions, we look forward to continuing to work with Representative Turner's office on the bill. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comment, but also appreciate you working with the author on this. This is very complex stuff, but it's very important that we get it right when we make changes. And so, really appreciate y'all working with him on that. Members, any other questions? All right. Chair calls Don Moore, self, for the bill, and then Isabel Casas is on deck. If you'd state your name, who you're with, and your position on the bill, please.
Sure. Don Moore is my name. I'm the father and guardian. As you heard Representative Turner speak, Joshua is my son. Here to talk to you today about the House bills that we brought forward. It's been a pleasure to work with Chris Turner's office and share our concerns as a family. This is personal to us, so I'm going to try to get through this without weeping.
And your position on the bill, which I'm
Position on
pretty
the
sure
bill
is
is
for.
obviously for it.
Yeah, I'm
Support.
sorry. We got to do it
That's
for the
fine.
record, so.
Thank you for helping.
Yeah,
I did prepare some comments, if you bear with me.
absolutely.
Be happy to share my thoughts.
Absolutely, Mr. Moore.
Also happy to answer any questions any of you have. There's nothing here that's not open to discussion. Certainly appreciate any interest and concerns that any of you may have. So I know that that's fine with me. So thank you for the opportunity to appear before you and address the Moore family's support of these House bills that come before you today. I have a picture of my son here, Joshua. He was 27 when he passed. He was an IDD, intellectually disabled young adult. Life ahead of him. Life planning with special needs, raised through the Garland Independent School District in Dallas. Graduate of Rowlett High School. He achieved full accreditation with Texas State Schools. He was an Iron Eagle in the football club there. Many Friday night lights with Josh, and his job was to sound the trucker horns and ring the school bell out on the football field. So he was socially interactive. And I put this picture here so you can understand him as an individual.
Yeah. Y'all favor a lot.
Thank you.
A lot.
I was proud of him. I still am proud of him.
Yep.
He's in my heart and with me every day. I'm here to advocate for the additional safety and protections under Texas law for our most vulnerable. Those with intellectual development disorders whom reside in community-based living residential group homes. Not all of you, but most of you have been made aware in various communications I've had over this past year with the committee. The tragedy that impacted my son, as Representative Turner described. I'm here today to honor Joshua and his death and speak to you for Joshua and ask each of you to support these House bills and being considered and referred out of committee to the members of the 88th Texas Legislature to be enacted into state law. Much investigative work and reporting and documentation as to all of the details and circumstances of my son's case and that of others, I would add, as well as local media reported in these 2 past years, has been completed to bring all of us here together today for the call to action that is before us to protect our most vulnerable in our communities and our society. For the Moore family, it was always an objective. For Joshua, to be all he could be in life and develop him for the challenges ahead in life. I cite many achievements with Joshua, his senior graduation with full credits, and my possibilities as a hipster, which is an organization in Plano, Texas. He spent 4 years in that program, long, challenging years, developing him for vocational skills in the Texas workforce, and previous to that with DARS. He was a recipient of all of those services and achieved in those programs. Ultimately, his employment part-time at the local cheesecake factory in Allen, Texas, during the COVID-19 pandemic. What an achievement that was for us. Josh was a comedian. He loved social interaction with others. He wanted what everyone else wants in life. He wanted a job. He wanted a family. He wanted skills. He wanted a paycheck. He enjoyed high school and was raised in Rowlett, Texas as the Iron Eagle in the male cheer squad. You see, for our family, it was all about life planning for special needs families, which began before adulthood at a very early age. He was diagnosed at age 2. Many were involved with very challenging childhood developments, and to know that in the end it was all taken away from him because the community-based living plan for standards of care failed him and failed his right to protections and personal safety. I ask each of you today, without reservation, how many more must perish before we act to provide additional strengthened protections and safety in our laws to those we care and for whom we are serve and are our most vulnerable in our society? I implore each of you on this committee, let the tragedy of what cost Joshua Moore his life pave the way forward in supporting these House bills and additional protections to ensure these events that unfolded in neglect will never, ever happen to another mentally challenged, intellectually disabled person. That is, in fact, what this legislation proposes to accomplish for our most vulnerable. I'm prepared to answer any questions you have or anything at this time that you'd like to ask.
All right, thank you, and yeah, I don't know how, there's no way to say sorry enough, but it's tragic. Thank you for being here. Members, any questions? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Sure.
For testifying today and for advocating for other families as well. And I have similar constituents who've had similar issues in different caregiving spaces. Was the individual caregiver in this situation, did he have a history, or do you know, did he have a history of abuse?
Yes, as a matter of public record, his history was intent to distribute greater than 2 grams of drugs, and he was found guilty on that charge. He was on probation. I do know in the public record, from what I was able to learn, he violated that probation. And I will tell you, he was put in charge of psychotropic drug distribution in the group home because he, in this background check, had been a local check, and he was on deferred adjudication with the state of Texas, so it's as if the felony never occurred.
So the home went ahead, his employer hired him with this
He,
history?
in fact, was the son of the owner of the group home agency.
Wow. So in all of this time, the families that he was providing care for were never informed about his background. This was something after the fact that you found out?
This was all learned after the fact, through investigation.
Okay, and it concerns me. I appreciate what Rep. Turner was, or the intention of this, because of the individual, not until they're fully found to have committed an offense, then the license suspension, right? But for somebody who's under investigation, what is your understanding that will happen with that individual?
Unlike most agencies, my understanding now is that he can continue to serve the IDD community and others, given this incident. And my opposition to that is that while you're under investigation, and now in fact there's a report through Adult Protective Services and Texas HHS that was done, full investigation, that he was found with neglect. I found it interesting in that report, it said that physical abuse was inconclusive, given the nature of the firearm being in the home and it being used to shoot and kill Joshua, that was owned by the caregiver. And that's a matter the Dallas Police case files HHS has.
Wow. And stepping back, the actual institute, or the home, the owners, were there any penalties?
To my understanding, there was one penalty, and I believe it was $2,400 if memory serves. I don't have the details with me. I have record of that.
Wow, there's so much more to uncover here, but I do appreciate you testifying your information, and thank you so much for advocating for everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? All right, thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Chair calls Isabel Casas with Texas Council on Community Centers and Private Providers Association on the bill. I show nobody else wishing to testify, so if you want to testify, please make sure you're signed up. Okay, and we will be calling the resource witness, Corey Kinzer, next. If you go ahead and state.
Would you rather?
No.
Okay.
No, we're good. If you'd state your name, who you're with, your position on the bill, please.
Yes. Good morning, Chair Frank and members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning. My name is Isabel Casas. I'm here to testify on House Bill 1008. I am the Director of Government Relations for IDD Services with the Texas Council of Community Centers. As an association, the Texas Council represents the state's 39 local IDD authorities that are statutorily authorized to conduct certain functions on behalf of the state across all 254 counties of Texas. As the chair mentioned, I am also offering this testimony on behalf of the Private Provider Association of Texas, otherwise known as PPAT. Safeguarding the health and safety of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or IDD, is the most fundamental responsibility of providers of IDD services. As such, we appreciate Representative Turner's interest in the health and safety of individuals with IDD and agree with the intent of HB 1008. What's more, we greatly appreciate Representative Turner and his staff's willingness to collaborate with stakeholders and address various points of concern with the filed version of HB 1008. These concerns include just clarifying the definition of group homes and discussing further and giving more consideration to the timeline for suspending a direct care worker who is the subject of an abuse, neglect, and exploitation allegation. While we have not yet had the opportunity to review the committee substitute, we do look forward to continuing to work with Representative Turner to ensure the bill upholds the intended effect of protecting individuals with IDD. Once again, I thank you for the opportunity to testify on HB 1008, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Yes, Representative Ramos.
Thank you, Ms. Casas. So currently in the process or the system, if there is an employee under investigation, what are the requirements of the home or the care? What are the requirements in terms of alerting other individuals that the person who's caring for your disabled loved one is currently under investigation? How do I know when I'm leaving my mother there, my child there, that the caregiver that's providing him the care is currently under investigation?
I would defer to HHSC to speak to the specific requirements. Of course, as you know, and I know that we will discuss it with the next bill that comes up, there are requirements for providers to conduct background checks in terms of sharing any information with families or with loved ones. HHSC would better understand those requirements. I do know that I can't speak to every single provider in Texas. There are many, many providers. Of those who I am familiar with, I understand that if someone is under an investigation, the likelihood of them being taken out of direct care work is very high, especially depending on what the allegation is. But again, I'll defer to HHSC to share with you exactly what those requirements and expectations are. And then I do know some providers do take their own action to provide that space and create that space.
So the onus is on the provider to take the initiative, as far as you know, to remove an individual if they're...
They do, yes. Other than what HHSC requires, some providers do go beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Chair calls Corey Kentzer, with HHSC on the bill as a resource witness. Representative, state your name, who you're with.
Good morning, Chair Frank, members. My name is Corey Kentzer. I am the Associate Commissioner for Regulatory Enforcement at HHSC, and we are on the bill.
Okay, Representative Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions are with the fiscal note. Are you very familiar with it? Or I know these things get put together kind of late, but.
I can speak generally to the FTEs and even more generally to the IT piece. I have another resource witness with me that can talk about some of the other costs associated with it on the facility side.
Okay. It looks high to me. I'm surprised to see that you're doing so much technology work and that there's this many FTEs. So the agency has a licensing process already, right? And so you review applicants, I'm assuming you do background checks, all those types of things. And then aren't you already presented with scenarios where you're going to end up removing somebody with a license? Set aside what this bill's proposing, just current law, current rules.
This one is a little different because of the way that it was drafted. It was drafted in a way that would require the creation of an interim registry. In order for us to enforce some of these asks, for example, there's a piece in there that discusses the individual is not allowed to care for anyone with IDD. So in order to make sure that that person wouldn't move from one employer to another, there would need to be some type of a registry that is created that employers could check upon hire to make sure that they're not hiring somebody who's currently under investigation or going through due process.
But don't you have a database already of your licensees, and it would be flagged in that database? So why would you need to build a separate registry?
The individuals that are providing care at these locations are not licensed. They're not necessarily licensed. They're
Oh, is this a new license?
They're not professionally credentialed.
Says the bill would require a group home or residential facility licensed by Health and Human Services to suspend employment. So I think I must be missing something.
So the way that we read there's two pieces to it. One is the license, permit, or certification, if you will, of the actual provider. And then there's the employees that work within that provider. And the employees that work within that provider are not professionally credentialed. However, the provider has a certification. So there's two pieces here. And
Okay.
one that would prevent an individual from performing services.
Okay, so the center, the community-based center's licensed, but if they have 20 employees, they are not, and that's where that's what you have to build. That's new.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks for explaining that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The background check, when they're doing if somebody's looking to hire, would the background check not catch, what would it catch? Would it catch, it wouldn't catch accusations, but it would catch.
So this provider type, they perform the background checks on their employees. So these.
So you're not providing any data for them?
We do not do the background checks for the employees at this provider. The providers do, and we confirm those background checks whenever we're out there, and we do investigations or recertifications.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I still have questions about the numbers. I don't understand the need for 13 program specialists to monitor investigation and status individuals. So I think rather than tying up this meeting, if you'd be open to a follow-up maybe with me and the bill author to, this just looks really high to me.
Absolutely. We have been working with Representative.
And it may change pretty dramatically with some of the changes, because there's a big difference between suspending everybody essentially as soon as an accusation happens versus a confirmed accusation. Representative Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So y'all don't keep a registry of any sort for people that have injured or mistreated? I mean, how would a provider get that information if y'all are not providing it?
So we do have a registry. We have the Employee Misconduct Registry, and that the individuals that are there are after full due process. It's been either waived or has been finalized by an administrative law judge. So the Employee Misconduct Registry, that's where they go. But we do have to create an interim registry to pick up investigations and due process.
So if indeed it's just someone that's already been, the allegations have been proven, but they're on appeal, you could already add them as your registry is now.
We don't, not if they're on appeal.
But you could.
That's
what this bill would do.
Oh.
That doesn't seem to add a lot of employees. It just seems to add a checkbox or something on that.
I think the bill is written, if I'm not mistaken, the bill is written, anybody who has an accusation would go on there. That is a lot different. If it is confirmed, which is what the bill author is looking at doing, that will make a dramatic difference, I think, here. I don't know, you can't speak to exactly what kind of a difference, but that makes a significant difference. I would assume. Is that?
It would.
Not trying to put words in your mouth. Okay.
It would make a difference if we were looking at this from the perspective of the kind of what we're doing for the Employee Misconduct Registry.
So the Employee Misconduct Registry, if I'm a provider and I'm looking to hire and I'm doing my background check, do I have access to that?
The Employee Misconduct Registry is public.
Okay, so my background check does include that, because it does seem like we talk background checks, and it seems like they're all disparate, right? Like we've had issues in other cases where you're like, well, this agency knows it, but this agency doesn't, and that's something that maybe somebody can take on as a charge. There's some bills going around, so if you did real quick research, you could get that maybe improved. Oh, Representative Noble maybe has one. Not that we can talk about any other bills, but I think that is. Members, any other questions for the resource witness? Yes, Representative Ramos.
Thank you. The Employee Misconduct Registry, those are employees who have finally been charged or found. The investigation is complete and full, and these are individuals who were found to have committed some type of violation.
That's correct.
So if I'm working at this provider and there's an investigation, I'm an employee, I could essentially leave and just kind of bounce around and and nothing comes on the registry because there was never, I didn't stick around as an employee long enough to be found guilty of this violation. So I could be, as an employee, kind of going to different places and not really being found guilty anywhere because I leave before there's a further investigation. So I would never, or essentially not necessarily be picked up to be on your registry to alert other providers, correct?
Well, and when an individual were to leave, if they were under investigation, that investigation would continue regardless as if they left. And so that would continue. And if they didn't explore or take advantage of due process, or if they did and there was a final ruling against them, they would go on that employee misconduct registry.
Okay, and so if the patient has been deceased or whatever during that process, it'll be difficult because I'm just MIA now, I go somewhere else. The complete investigation would really be difficult to finalize and close, correct? So I could still have that history.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just saying if the person who I violated has passed away or what have you, and there's still an investigation, but I haven't really found, not even criminally or through your own investigation, guilty of committing any offense, I could technically just go MIA and there won't be really anything.
Yes,
track that.
If the investigation wasn't completed or if for some reason there was not a finding against that person, yes, then that person could go to a different location.
Okay. How long does it take from an original complaint to the actual investigation? How long is that process?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can get that information to you pretty quickly because we have there is a method to triaging complaints, but that's not my area, and I can get that for you though.
And do you know how many overall centers that your investigative unit is responsible for in the state of Texas?
I can tell you that we had approximately 15,444 complaint intakes that for this particular provider type of abuse, neglect, or exploitation in fiscal year 2022.
2022. And so over 15,000, and how many investigators do you all have in your unit that actually go and do these investigations?
I'd have to get that information to you as well. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can get that number for you.
Okay, please do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, members? Okay, thank you. At this time, there are no other witnesses signed up to testify on the bill. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 10,008? Excuse me, 1008. I can't read. Seeing none, public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Turner to close on House Bill 1008.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I really appreciate the discussion and the good thoughts and questions from the committee members. And I think that your questions sort of speak to the complexity of this issue. Some of the challenges in this issue, Representative Shaheen, your questions that the provider, the owner or the operator of the group home is licensed through the commission, but the individual employees who actually provide the care day in, day out are not. And so there's a lot of different layers of this that we're trying to work through. But I think with respect to the fiscal note, and again, we got that also very late, a few hours ago, overnight.
Whoops.
Yeah. But obviously the fiscal note is on the bill as introduced, which in listening to the last witness's answer to your question, Representative Ramos, that over 15,000 such complaints just in 2022. Obviously, that's a lot of people. I can see why that would be potentially expensive for the agency to implement, which is why we have in the committee substitute that you will have before you soon narrowed this to say only people that have been found have a finding of misconduct by the commission, which that will shrink that number considerably, but also obviously the commission already has that data because they've already conducted an investigation. Right. So that should be, I would think, relatively easy to flag that in an existing database, and so that should be a much smaller or negligible fiscal note. But I very much appreciate the time spent on this today, Mr. Chairman. Sure. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we'll get that substitute to you, and appreciate the other stakeholders who testified today on the bill. And we do appreciate their input. We'll make sure they get all the details on this, but we want to move these forward as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions?
Likewise.
All right, thank you. If there's no objection, House Bill 1008, I don't know why I can't say that, will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. House Bill 1008 is left pending without objection. Chair lays out House Bill 1009 and recognizes Representative Turner to explain his bill. And again, yeah, same deal. You've got some changes you're going to make. Talk about them.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Members working on Mr. Moore's case introduced me to the way group homes are regulated or not regulated, as the case may be, and some of the problems that can result. As discussed, these facilities care for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and as such, they should be held to the highest standards of care. Caregivers who work in these facilities are entrusted with the care of extremely vulnerable population and should be well vetted. What we have found is that is not always the case. Currently, caregivers for individuals with IDD are only subject to a Texas Department of Public Safety background check, which only identifies convictions in Texas state courts. These background checks do not flag crimes committed in other states, meaning a caregiver who committed a serious crime in a different state could pass a Texas background check and be approved to care for this very vulnerable population. Now, currently, teachers, substitute teachers, classroom aides, daycare employees are all subject to federal criminal background checks when they are hired. And the reasoning behind that is that we trust those professions with the care of our children, so we should be sure without any doubt that they will do so safely. So why don't we hold caregivers for the IDD community to the same standards? And this lack of oversight can have serious consequences. So one case involves Raul Olguin, who is a 24-year-old man with autism who began receiving care in a Northeast Dallas group home. After just 71 days in the home, Raul died. He was malnourished, and lack of food was named as one of the causes of his death. He was 24 years old, and he weighed 85 pounds at the time of his death. Investigations found that Raul's caregiver should have never been entrusted with the well-being of the IDD community. This particular caregiver had pled guilty in Arkansas to stealing money from a program that funded daycare for welfare recipients and had attempted a fraudulent daycare voucher scheme, serving jail time for her offenses. Now, a federal background check found these charges when the same caregiver applied for a child care business. The group home, which was not required by state law to run a federal background check, only ran the DPS check and therefore missed this very serious offense. So, members, this bill, HB 1009, would simply require both state and federal criminal history records to be reviewed for caregivers who are authorized to care for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. These individuals and the families who love them deserve this peace of mind at the very least. And you will have a committee substitute on this also. The substitute will clarify that it is the provider, not HHSC, that's responsible for doing the background check and reviewing the records. And I understand there's also a fiscal note on this one.
Yes, sir.
I think that should largely address that fiscal note. So we'll get that to you as soon as you're ready for it. And I think there may be some witnesses. And
Yeah, there's a couple witnesses. Yeah, Representative Noble.
What would it cost a provider to run a national, federal?
Great question, Representative Noble. So our information is, according to HHSC, when we've talked to them about this, a federal background check costs $38.25.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? All right, thank you. You do have 3 witnesses, it looks like. Chair calls Sandra Baton, Providers Alliance for Community Services of Texas, on the bill. And then Hannah Gill is on deck. You'd state your name, who you're with, and your position on the bill.
Thank you. I'm Sandra Batten, Executive Director for Providers Alliance for Community Services of Texas, testifying on the bill. And I think a little bit of the conversation that happened with the previous bill kind of applies here, which is I think providers on its face don't have any issues with doing federal background checks. I think we'd like to make sure that the standards that are applied for IDD services are applied across the board for everybody. I don't know if the committee substitute is going to be calling for fingerprint background checks, for instance, which are a lot more expensive, and it takes more time to get your employees to go do that. And right now, we have a huge turnover rate. 40% of people don't even show up the first day of orientation because they're getting paid less than $10 an hour for these types of positions. And we have a 30% vacancy rate in group homes. So at any one point right now, 1 out of 3 homes don't have regularly scheduled staff. So we just want to make sure we're not in a position where if this service is treated differently, it makes it that much easier if somebody has to take an extra step to go and work for home care or go and work for Dairy Queen, which has legitimately happened during the lunch break of an orientation. Staff is left and taken a job that is higher paying and less responsibility. So all that to say, we look forward to continuing to work on this one also with Representative Turner.
Thank you for being here. I know when something happens at a provider, especially if it's a bad provider, we all of a sudden, we cast a net over every provider, and that's not always the case. There are best practices we need to do, and we need to keep making those better and better as we go down the road. So again, appreciate you working on it. And so Representative Noble.
Mm-hmm. I assume you'll do a background check for employees. And so would a federal background check just replace the Texas background check? Can you just switch to doing that one instead? I don't know.
No, it would be an addition.
Why in the world would the Texas information not be included on a federal one? That's why I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but my understanding from providers that do it is that a lot of them have like a third-party service that do it, and they just run both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
And I don't know. Yeah, Representative Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do background checks, and if it's a federal one, it includes all 50 states. So it would include it. Yeah, I mean, because it's federal. But the providers. So well, you know what? I'm just going to be quiet. Thank you.
I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions on the services because I know it is very complicated. We received a whole lot of questions about, for instance, licensure. Well, each individual home is not licensed, and one provider has a whole bunch of group homes, not necessarily just one. And in some of the cases that you've heard today, it wasn't a group home at all. It's a kind of like a foster care arrangement. And so all of those things actually add a whole lot of complication to how you address some of these things and make sure that they never happen again.
Yeah. And I'm assuming I don't run background checks, but I would assume a federal criminal background check is not going to catch the same thing a state background check of, it's not, some of the things that we're trying to catch are not criminal. If you have a complaint against you that is adjudicated through the process, it's not criminal. So I don't know. I really don't know. And I'm not sure, I don't show a resource witness on this. Yeah, okay.
Maybe I wasn't the best person for that one.
Okay.
But I do know there's a difference between what gets captured in like a fingerprint background check, for instance, versus when you're running other types of searches. So.
Okay, thank you. Chair calls. That's right. Chair calls Hannah Gill, NAMI, Texas, for the bill, and then Isabel Casas on deck. You'd state your name, who you're with, and your position on the bill, please.
Hannah Gill, NAMI, Texas, in support of HB 1009. Sorry. Good morning, Chair Frank and committee members. I am Hannah Gill, Policy Fellow of NAMI, Texas, which is affiliated with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. My testimony is in support of HB 1009. As you previously heard from Representative Turner and the Moore family, when residential caregivers or providers are not adequate, it is the individuals in their care that suffer the consequences. As Rep. Turner shared, 24-year-old Raul is another heartbreaking example of this. Raul is a Texas resident in the care of a state licensed caregiver. Unbeknownst to the state, his caregiver had a federal criminal conviction that was not flagged during the statewide background check as the conviction was ruled in another state. Raul was removed from his mother's care, and while the allegations were quickly proven to be unfounded, Raul was not returned to the custody of his mother. He remained in this individual's care for 71 days before being removed and placed in a new caregiver's home. However, the ramifications of this poor care he received could not be reversed. On April 11, 2021, Raul passed away. He died from aspiration pneumonia, and malnutrition contributed to his death. HB 1009 would require a review of criminal history record information for residential caregivers. Additionally, this bill would require the Health and Human Services Commission to review both the state and federal criminal history records for caregivers who hold a license or are otherwise unauthorized by the Commission to care for individuals with IDD. This bill is crucial for ensuring the health and well-being of Texans with IDD. Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, members, thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you very much for your testimony. Chair calls, is it Isabel Casas, Texas Council on Community Centers and Private Providers Association on the bill. State your name, who you're with, and your position on the bill, even though I just did it. But that's
No problem. I'm happy to. Good morning again, Chair Frank and members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony again this morning. My name is Isabel Casas, and I am here to testify on House Bill 1009. As I mentioned previously, I am the Director of Government Relations for IDD Services. I am with the Texas Council of Community Centers, and we, as an association, the Texas Council represent the 39 local IDD authorities that are statutorily authorized to conduct certain functions on behalf of the state in every county in Texas. I am also offering this testimony on behalf of the Private Providers Association of Texas, otherwise known as PPAT. As I mentioned previously, we greatly appreciate Representative Turner's interest in enhancing health and safety protections for individuals with IDD. These precautions include conducting background checks when hiring workers who will end up providing direct care services for individuals with IDD. Expanding the scope of background checks to include federal criminal background checks in addition to the current statewide background checks is a common sense strategy. Once again, we appreciate Representative Turner's and his staff's willingness to collaborate with stakeholders and address various points of concern with the filed version of HB 1009, such as clarifying the definition of group homes. And while we have not had the opportunity to review the committee substitute, we look forward to continuing to work with the representative to ensure the bill accurately reflects the intended purpose, not only to protect individuals with IDD, but also hopefully to avoid unintended consequences for providers that are experiencing substantial workforce challenges and unprecedented levels of turnover. Once again, I thank you very much for the opportunity to testify this morning on HB 1009, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I've got one from how you're going to apply this. So I do a federal background check and I show a conviction from 10 years ago. I don't know. I mean, pick a small drug charge, something like that. Does that mean no hire ever? I mean, are we getting, information's great, but I think you know what I'm asking. It's like if from a provider standpoint, if there's anything on there, any conviction, does that mean no hire?
I could not speak directly to that. I am not a provider.
Don't y'all represent the providers?
We represent the local authorities and the
Okay.
community centers.
Okay.
I'm also offering testimony on behalf of PPAT.
Okay.
In terms of exactly what all goes into determining these, I'm sorry.
Background.
Yes, the results of the background checks. I'm not sure if HHSC has any requirements in terms of how back they go, how far back they go. I would assume if anything comes up, someone would not be hired.
Okay. Thank you. Members, any other questions? All right. Thank you. At this time, there are no other witnesses signed up to testify. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1009? Seeing none, public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Turner to close on House Bill 1009.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. And Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. And so our bill, in requiring the federal background check, would refer back to the current statute, which is Section 250.006, titled Convictions Barring Employment. And the current statute outlines various offenses, a long list: homicide, sexual abuse of a young child, et cetera.
Right. Okay.
That bars employment. So
Thank
we
you.
so we don't create
Should probably have already known that.
we don't create new criteria. We just refer back to the existing statute.
Okay. Perfect.
Using the federal background check.
Great.
And Representative Noble, to your question, so based on our conversation with HHSC, the federal background check, as previously discussed, $38.25 per check. A DPS check is $1. And so I think that's one of the reasons that's what currently happens. And so, whether or not you just do federal and that includes everything, I mean, that's something we can talk about. But the $1 to continue doing DPS is probably not cost prohibitive either. So So just for your information on that, if that's helpful. And finally, I would just say, and with all these bills, certainly there are group homes out there, there are providers out there doing a great job for their clients, and there's no doubt about that. And I don't want to in any way try to paint a broad picture here, but clearly there are some challenges that need to be addressed, and that's what these bills are to do. So we'll get those substitutes to you, and if there's no other questions, I will close.
Okay, very good. We do have one question. You almost got out.
No,
Representative Ramos.
Happy days.
Thank you, Representative Turner. No, it's not a question, but it goes. I was looking at the penal code or the convictions that the individual should have. If going back to the section that you're referencing, if the individual has violated any of these within the United States, then that would bar them from employment, including like indecent exposure, aggravated robbery, healthcare fraud, and such. So there's a really robust list of different offenses that you would see would necessarily affect somebody who is providing the care for another individual. You wouldn't want those people there. And the concern from the providers that somebody during a lunch break or training goes to whatever, HEB or whatever, to get a job during the break. Well, I don't want that person taking care of my mother anyway. If that is what they want to do, I don't want you there being, unhappy, and then that's going to affect my loved one. So this is a wonderful bill, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that, and it's well said. And listen, and I'll be the first to say, yes, we need to increase pay for people in this profession and a lot of other professions. There's no doubt about that. But I think we need to separate the two also and just can't say, well, because it's historically a low-paid profession, that means we can also have lower standards and put these clients at risk. I think we got to take on both challenges.
All right, thank you very much. And I think now you close.
I close. Yes.
Again. All right, thank you. If there's no objection, House Bill 1009 will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. House Bill 1009 is left pending without objection. It's the chair's intent to do this bill by Representative Turner and then Mr. Bales, Representative Bales, and then we'll break for the floor. Just for anybody who's listening to whether or not you need to come down, I think we're going to do those two bills, and then we'll catch the rest after lunch. All right. Chair lays out House Bill 1010 and recognizes Representative Turner to explain his bill. And you're welcome to talk about the changes. Sorry, we're going to work on that, getting those earlier. It's not you. That's all of us. So you can talk about those. But
we'll
also keep it clean.
Requesting committee substitutes right as Ledge Council was working on the bill filing deadline, so it's kind of a
that may improve. So anyway,
well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. The last bill I have today dealing with group homes is one that fixes particularly egregious oversight in the care of this population. And House Bill 1010 simply states that a person caring for an individual with an intellectual or developmental disability cannot take out a life insurance policy on the individual they're caring for, unless the two are related. Members, this should be common sense, and most people I have discussed this with are shocked to learn that this practice is completely illegal currently in Texas. I did too until I heard the story of Leroy Anderson and his uncle, David Hunt. And unfortunately, David Hunt couldn't make the trip to be here in Austin today. He wanted to be to tell his story and his nephew's story, but I'm going to briefly tell his story since in his absence. So David Hunt's nephew, Leroy Anderson, was a 49-year-old man who relied on others to care for him. He had the intellect of a 10-year-old. He was also diabetic, schizophrenic, and bipolar. Leroy liked to sing, he liked to eat out, he liked to buy new clothes, and he loved his uncle. The last time the two saw one another was at a barbecue restaurant. They made plans to eat lunch there again soon. Unfortunately, the next time Mr. Hunt saw his nephew was not at that restaurant, but was at the hospital, and Leroy was in a coma and hours away from dying. While he was under the care of his group home in Dallas, Leroy went into a diabetic coma and, as I said, ultimately died. So as Mr. Hunt and his family grieved for Leroy and searched for answers about what happened, who was responsible, if anyone, they had another unimaginable truth that they realized they had to deal with. In the course of settling Leroy's affairs, Mr. Hunt called the life insurance company. He was told that the beneficiary of Leroy's life insurance policy had been changed without his knowledge, from himself to the owner of the group home in charge of caring for Leroy. Even worse, as I said, it was legal. Currently, HHSC rules say that employees should avoid conflicts of interest with their clients. but do not specifically address whether a provider, staff member, or paid caregiver can be named a beneficiary on compliance policy. Members, it's an unfathomable conflict of interest to have a facility entrusted with the lives of these extremely vulnerable individuals eligible to also be the beneficiary of their life insurance policy. And that's all this bill seeks to do, is to prevent caregivers from taking out life insurance policies on the people under their care. The committee substitute that you will have clarifies that all types of life insurance policies are covered by the bill, also further defines the term relative for the purposes of the bill. And I'll be happy to answer any questions and respectfully request the right to close.
Yep, and you certainly will have that. Any questions for Representative Turner? I would assume there's some like fraud statute or something with a mentally
you would think
disability. I mean, that from a because we're talking about rule as opposed to I don't know what the rules are on life insurance and changing beneficiaries, but and particularly for somebody who's mentally handicapped. But okay, I think we have. Oh, I'm sorry. We show nobody wishing to testify on this. So at this time, there are no witnesses signed up to testify. Is there anyone who wants to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1010? Seeing none, public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Turner to close on House Bill 1010.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I appreciate your support in this common sense policy and look forward to working with you on it.
Okay, thank you. If there's no objection, House Bill 1010 will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and HB 1010 is left pending without objection. Chair lays out House Bill 637 and recognizes Representative Bales to explain his bill. And I know you've got some changes you're welcome to talk about. We don't have the committee substitute laid before us right now.
Got it. Chairman Frank, members, I sure appreciate the scope and the brevity of the topics you guys are hearing today. Have another bill which is very important to one of our underserved populations and a group of kids that need our love the most. So with that, I would like to lay out House Bill 637. This is a simple bill by nature, though extremely impactful with regards to one of our most vulnerable populations. In its current statute, permanency care benefits may only be extended past the age of 18 if the dependent first entered into a permanency care assistance agreement with a foster child's kinship provider after the child's 16th birthday. This can be a catastrophic issue for kinship providers who have been in this role for the majority of the child's life. In many situations, it's an elderly grandparent, often on a fixed income, to whom the responsibility and financial burden is taken upon to raise some of the kids who need our love and support the most. A child's senior year of high school can be one of the most financially burdensome by expenses associated with the graduation and preparation for the next chapter of adulthood. House Bill 637 allows the agency to enter into agreement for extended permanency care assistant payments after the month in which the child attains the age of 18, as long as the child is regularly attending high school or enrolled in a program leading to high school diploma or school equivalency certificate. I want to move forward with laying out this bill today, though we have been working with the agency over the weekend on language that will strengthen the intent of this bill. The substitute further clarifies that the payments are to be extended while the youth is enrolled in high school or an equivalent program. I believe we have some resource witnesses here from the agency, and I'd like to give them the opportunity to answer questions.
Okay.
Reserve the right to close.
All right, you will certainly have that. Members, any questions? So, and maybe the resource, but I'll ask you first. You mentioned kinship. Does this only affect kinship, or would this keep a child in foster care past their 18th birthday as well? I mean, kinship is foster as well,
This
but is it
predominantly
only for
to address
kinship?
kinship. So essentially, if you have, we have a situation in my district where it was an elderly grandmother who was taking on raising a grandchild, and that young man actually turned 18 at the very start of a senior year in high school. The benefits would cease at the end of that month. And like I said, you have a person who's on a fixed income,
Right.
very tough, expensive part of that life.
Yep.
And this would allow the agency to actually help with those payments through finishing that high school degree.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like for Representative Bales. Okay, Representative Noble.
Fiscal notes today are a mystery to me. This is another one. It can't be that many kids in our system for it to result in such a high fiscal note. You're just talking about extending it for a matter of months, not years, as they conclude high school. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll call the resource witness and talk about that. Chair calls Erica Banuelos with DFPS on the bill. If you'd state your name, who you're with, and position on the bill.
Erica Banuelos, I'm the CPS Associate Commissioner.
Okay, and you're on the bill.
So can I answer any questions that y'all might have?
Yeah, would you talk about the fiscal note and I guess adding to that, is this, because I didn't see anything in the bill that made me think it was only kinship. Which kids would it impact, how long, and under what circumstances?
So this really impacts verified kinship families. So in order for them to qualify for the permanency care assistance, they have to be verified. So it is a smaller population of the number of kids that we currently have in kinship placements. And I think the fiscal note that maybe is being looked at was for initially it was for kids all the way through the age of 21, but I believe there's going to be some revisions to the bill to only after they turn 18 all the way until they graduate from high school. That's the real population. So the fiscal note will go down significantly because it is just months for some after. So it should be about, I think the projection is about $2 million a year.
Thank you. That answer? Okay, and it would basically be until the child finishes high school?
High school or a program that's equivalent to high school.
Okay. And could that be through 21 if they're still working on it, or is that, it would be?
That's, well, I would assume, and I don't know, I have to further dive into what equivalent would be, right? Because we know that kids can work on their GED sometimes, which is the equivalent of a high school. So I think it would be dependent upon that. But from reading the bill, it looks like they have to be actively enrolled in a high school equivalent program in order to receive the payment.
Yeah. Okay. Representative Noble?
You may not know the answer to this. How many kids are we talking about that are 18 that are in kinship placements right now? Do we have any idea what that number might be in the state?
I don't.
And of course, this isn't all of them because some of them finish, of course, high school long before their 18th birthday.
I don't have the exact number for 18, but what I do know is that out of 42% of our children that are currently in kinship placement, only about 5% go through the verification process, and those would really be, and then you narrow that even down, right, to those that are still attending high school, so it would be a very small population.
So the 2 million seems an awfully exaggerated
Yeah, it
amount.
might be a little, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you very much. Members, any other questions? Okay. Thank you. At this time, there's no other witnesses signed up to testify. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 637? Seeing none, public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Bales to close on House Bill 637.
Thank you, Chairman Frank. And Representative Noble, that we simply had it so that it could be up to the age of 21. By no means was it our intention to actually extend that through the age of 21. So by working with agency staff, this was simply to put the suspenders on there for great clarification so there was no misinterpretation. They have to be actively working towards that high school degree or equivalents in order to be able to receive this and be part of that kinship.
Yeah. And I think just as a comment, I guess, if you want to, as you work through this and we get a better fiscal note or a more accurate fiscal note with what the changes, I'm not saying the fiscal note's not accurate based on the bill presented, but as we get one based on the committee sub, let us know, because it will have a fiscal note and we'll try to help get that worked out. It's my hope, one of the things we did last session, we've got a lot less kids coming into care because we're focusing on the more needy, and we ought to be able in that process to improve the care that we're giving to the kids that are there. And this is one. It's not. It's an important. It's not a bit. It shouldn't be a big number, but it will require a fiscal note, and so we can try to help you with that. And I'd be happy to try to help. And I think I got a lot of nods over here. I think some other people would. So we're still early enough in the process to get that done. So. With that, you got any other comments, sort of?
I appreciate that, and I couldn't agree more. And with that, I ask for your favorable consideration and your support that this be sent to general counselors once we have.
Yeah, I was about to say, don't say local. It's going to have a
substitute done and work through that process.
All right, thank you. If there's no objection, House Bill 637 will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and House Bill 637 is left pending. It is the intent of the chair to take a recess. If there's no objection, the committee will stand recessed until final adjournment or recess of the House today or during the period authorized for reading and referrals of bills if permission is granted by the House. The chair hears no objection. The committee will recess until final adjournment or recess of the House today or during the period authorized for the reading and referral of bills if permission is granted by the House without objection. I think I read that twice.